Hello. This is a kind of a video lecture, if you will, a quick interview with Steve Young in the Boston area. And we're going to be focusing on blockchain and supply chain, but from a legal perspective. So I've asked Steve Young to talk with us today. So, Steve, for my students who have no idea who you are, can you tell us a little bit about what you are in relationship with blockchain?
Sure. I am an attorney who focuses on companies that are doing different things with blockchain. I originally was focused in international law, specifically public international law, which is like treaty negotiation, this kind of thing, and then a closely related field of international investment law and international dispute arbitration and resolution, this kind of thing. And then I went back to school and I went back to school to get an LLM. It's a post law degree, graduate degree, where I studied, where I focused on blockchain and how it's going to change a variety of things. I'm mostly focused on how it's going to change types of governance and the relationship between individuals and their governments. And a lot of it was relatively theoretical, but some of it is actually being seen in what some of these new crypto companies are doing with blockchain. Since doing the LLM, I struck out on my own. When I was pursuing that degree here in the Boston area, I kept getting approached by companies in the crypto space that needed an attorney to help them out for a variety of regulatory means, both needs both here and around the world. And so I decided to double down on that. And right now I've got a practice where I focus entirely on crypto companies. A lot of what I do for them is regulatory compliance. In the United States, that's with the SEC or the CFTC, and sometimes with local state laws. There are states in the union that are passing laws making their jurisdictions friendly to crypto or less friendly to crypto, depending on the state. And the U.S. itself, federally, hasn't really taken a specific, hasn't legislated in a specific way. Though the SEC, the director of the SEC, has come out saying that most tokens should be considered as securities, just like a share of stock in a company. And so a lot of my practice focuses on trying to figure out what the SEC will think of different companies and how they're raising money. But also just I do a lot of what my job is an attorney is a counselor to their client, and a lot of what I do as a counselor who's experienced in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space is just advise my clients on whether something is a good idea or a bad idea, or a good investment, a bad investment. And again, I'm not like an investment advisor, but I'm on board more or less with a lot of these companies, and I'm helping them figure out their way forward. And it's these clients have a lot of, not even just my clients, but there's a lot of potential in the blockchain space. It
Well, let's
when
talk
you
about some of that potential. What
Okay.
what are you mentioned earlier the idea of how blockchain might change some things. There's a lot of buzz out there in terms of the potentials because of blockchain, and beyond the idea of you have the potential of becoming rich. Um, what are some real, more tangible, social or other type possibilities or promises that are out there with blockchain?
Sure. Um, so the root thing that blockchain does is it disintermediates. It takes out a middleman. Uh, and a good example of that is like Bitcoin. You don't need a bank for it. The bank being the middleman. And so anything that you could think of, maybe not anything, but many things that you could think of that require or currently have that middleman could be changed by applying blockchain technology in a specific way, or in a variety
So
of
for
ways.
documentation or
Sorry, what?
so like for documents, for information,
For
for
anything. So anything that requires a middleman. So some of the traditional examples are like a notary. If you want to confirm that, like you said, a document is legitimate, you take it to a notary and they stamp it, that saying that your signature is legitimate. or property ownership or of digital rights to like music or video, this kind of thing. It can, instead of preventing you from downloading it, it can help the artist get paid automatically when you watch it. And that takes the middleman out of like the music industry, right? What I as a lawyer trained, and I've taught constitutional law. I came at it from the perspective of what about the social contract, and so this is where I see some of the big possibilities. And a lot of especially the early adopters, the people that were really into crypto initially, are more or less, they call themselves like crypto anarchists and this kind of thing, and they think that Bitcoin is going to change the world because it's going to fundamentally change economics and everything, and it may do that. That seems doubtful, but who knows? However, I am of the opinion that smart contracts on using blockchain computing, and a smart contract is just an automated contract that can be written in code on the blockchain. I think that will be able to change the social contract, and I believe that will happen because it will make it so that the governments that we have, the federal government, the state government, will have to do less because a lot of individual interaction will be done through blockchains. A lot of it will be automated, and we just won't need as much government oversight for many things. Additionally, I think that if that blockchain computing could change the way that the government actors act, the way that policing is done. For example, take the example of the Fourth Amendment. Right now, police officers need to get a warrant to. I mean, there's definitely exceptions to all of this, but you're not law students, so we won't worry about that. But generally, the police need a warrant to search something, right? Especially a house. But right now, a bad cop could ignore that requirement, go into a house, and if they find something, there will be a variety of exceptions that it might still get into court, even though they didn't have a warrant and they violated the Fourth Amendment. If somehow blockchain we were able to create a smart social contract or a smart constitution, you could make it so that the policeman's car wouldn't, or policewoman, the police's car wouldn't operate until there was a warrant or something like that. The cop wouldn't be able to search someone or take pictures of any evidence because the camera itself was connected to a smart contract that wouldn't work until a warrant was provided. Also, you could have it so that body cameras that police have on them they're recording all the time, and you could make it so that the police themselves don't have the authority or ability even to delete the data because it's saved on the blockchain and requires an outside signatory to watch it and review it. You could have it from the ACLU or some other hippie organization that would confirm it. And these are definitely some of the wilder claims of what blockchain could do. Definitely,
I've seen everything from
Sure.
Preventing modern day slavery,
Oh yeah.
obviously food fraud, food safety documentations, auditing, allergen control. Was this product actually made in a peanut-free
Right.
facility? And what is the documentation that proves that it was a peanut-free facility? Medical equipment, was this sanitized as per medical industry regulations after a surgery? Were all the tools that went in retrieved from the human body? These are things that people's lives are impacted in small and great ways, and we often take a lot of these steps for granted. I think there's a lot of things that we haven't even explored yet that could be impacted by blockchain, whether it be in the food industry or even just information. I mean, you and I, we talked previously, we're both military veterans. It's not the easiest thing to get access to your military records.
It sure is not.
Same thing like with your medical records.
Hmm.
You'd think that there would be a way to have, from cradle to grave, an easier access to everything that was ever, you know,
Yeah.
analyzed, tested, recorded about your own medical health. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously,
That
there's obstacles or challenges. What do you think might be some obstacles or challenges to achieve any of these promises?
uh, the main challenges I see are widespread adoption. Right now, a lot of the um, money in this space is, and a lot of the interest is in making more money. And so the enterprises that are adopting and using blockchain technology, they're doing it specifically in a way that's profitable, which is fine. But that means that other areas are getting kind of left behind. Um, I think that supply chain and any other like chain of custody type issue is huge. And some industries will be quicker adopters than others. And what's interesting is it's actually not that's actually one of the easiest ways to implement blockchain technology. I recently took a course on edX that was given by Hyperledger, a blockchain company, and it was like how to do a blockchain, and they had various the whole course had various different types of algorithms that they would use, and it walked you through making one. And the example that it used on each type was a simple step-by-step supply chain thing. And so, interestingly enough, like blockchain, I think if it's made for any single thing, I think supply chains is it. And fortunately, it didn't. I'm not a coder, but I was able to figure out how to at least the basics around making a supply chain related blockchain, where that the supply chain was confirmed at every level and it was a distributed network so that one bad person couldn't come in and hack the whole thing. That
Well,
being said,
you mentioned, I was going to say, you mentioned network,
uh-huh,
and that brings up an interesting point in terms of, let's say we're talking about medical records.
sure,
Let's say Blue Cross wants to have blockchain.
hmm,
It's not going to benefit the patient, the people, the consumer, right?
hmm,
Or Blue Cross, unless every single facility, doctor, whatever in their network is all on blockchain.
hmm,
Same thing, like for instance, like Walmart.
hmm,
It's not Walmart can't say they are blockchain for grocery stores unless every single food, every single carrot and Campbell's
hmm,
soup and who knows what is all um, uh, from farm to shelf, I guess, actually, if you want to
yeah,
call it that, participating in the entire blockchain
hmm.
protocol.
Um, I think you're right. And I think that it's the clients that need to become informed about what the benefits of blockchain are and to demand it. And I think that the medical example is a perfect example because I think we all recognize like, oh, I don't want my medical information out there or other information potentially, right? We see how much data is worth. We see how much like we're not really the clients of Facebook, we're the product because they sell our data and
Yeah.
everything, right? We want to. There's generally a recognition that our data is out there, and a lot of people will, as they recognize that they don't want that to happen, they should turn towards blockchain, and that will force, especially in the medical field, as people say, "Oh, I'm going to surgery," but now everyone knows everything. They'll realize, "Oh, I want this to be um, I want to control this, and that's what blockchain offers in in the data field, whether it's medical data or whatever. It allows client side control. There's a company called Civic right now, which is doing identification that's controlled by the client, by the individual, right? And it's cool because it allows you to bring in all of your identifying information from whatever source and control it in one source. The idea being that in the end, instead of having to go to the so I recently got married, and my wife jumped through all
Congratulations.
sorts of hoops. Thank you. My wife jumped through all sorts of hoops to change her name slightly. Like she didn't even anyway. And whereas if because she had to go to the Social Security Administration, she had to go to the State Department, change her passport, Massachusetts driver's license. She had to change it at her retirement account at work itself, right? But if you're because her identification was from all these different places around, right? Work,
Right.
government, whatever. Whereas if your identity and your data is controlled by you, and you just let each individual place have your identity, have the data that they need to have for whatever purpose you have there, right? When you control that, then you only have to change that central nexus, I guess, right? If you control your identity wallet and you say, well, I got married, my name went from Steve Young to Steve Johnson, and you just change it right there, and then whenever you give out your information again, it's uniform across the board. The other part of that is when you go to the hospital, you give them your medical information and nothing else. You get pulled over by a cop, you show, oh, I'm licensed to drive, but nothing else. Like the cop may not need to know your address, right, or other things like that that they might be able to abuse. You go to work and you give them your banking information, but not your home address or not your medical information, that sort of thing. So I think
Right.
that when individuals realize that how much control they can have over their own lives and over their own information, that will push demand, and that will push demand in the medical field, in the food safety field, and in just about every other field. I think as people recognize, oh, this is a thing that could happen, and it could happen relatively soon, they're
Right.
going to want it.
Well, and I think, in closing, this is almost going to sound like the father in me or something speaking, but no one else is more responsible for you and your family other than yourself. If you have if you have a medical condition, if you have a food allergy, if you have something that you're looking out for, that person who is preparing food for you, selling food to you, serving food to you, they're not necessarily going to know that information.
Sure.
And growing up, the Saturday morning cartoons always told you that knowledge is power. We
Hmm.
also know that an imbalance of power is referred to as bullying. So that
Yeah.
idea of controlling your information is even more so important, whether we're talking about the age of the internet and such amount of data that's out there, or just the idea of the state of the world and the state of the safety of the food that we eat, or the severity of the medical issues that we're faced with as we live longer and longer in life.
Hmm.
Um, I want to give
I
an opportunity for you I was going to say, any last thoughts about what students looking at the global economics of food and agriculture who are really kind of thinking about blockchain for the first time as the idea of, could this be something to research? Is this an option? Is this something that I as a consumer need to be concerned about in the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years? What are your kind of final thoughts on that?
Sure. I think it's definitely something that you should include in your research, even if it's not your primary focus, right? Uh, it's a lot of the blockchain enthusiasts are calling it the Internet 3.0, the next wave of the Internet, and I think that a lot of systems that we currently have will better serve individuals by being decentralized on a blockchain, and so I think that it will be more widespread as the days go by. So, however you can include it, or at least think about it in your research, that's important. There's a few things to keep in mind as you do that. The regulations around the world are all over the map. Some places like Switzerland and Belarus, of all places, and a few others are very friendly towards cryptocurrencies and blockchain and everything like that. Some places in the United States are friendly. Delaware, I think, just passed a law saying that, oh, yes, a smart contract on a blockchain is a contract. Arizona, similarly. But federally, it's still very up in the air. Another
Well,
thing,
what
a
about
lot of.
is it general data protection rules
Uh,
from nation to nation?
sure.
The
So
idea of how secure data is considered in a court of law, I guess, or just in terms of laws from nation to nation?
so that will actually uh, data stored on a blockchain will definitely affect that. I was actually talking with a patent attorney colleague of mine, and the EU just passed a bunch of sweeping laws on who controls what data and who's liable, and and where it's located, right? Through blockchain computing, that becomes a lot more fuzzy because if you're there's a app called Graphite and there's one called file share and storage which allows you to share your, it's like a cloud service, but it's not one single computer holding your stuff. It's spread out over the whole network. Um, and you can't tell what is where. And so this changes all those sorts of rules. That being said, the inherent nature of blockchain does protect your data more than some law written by, or some treaty written by a bunch of statesmen. What's interesting is I will say it's such a new field that regulations haven't caught up yet. And so just keep that in mind as you do it. And also, if you're not a coder, I would suggest learn some basic code. I have colleagues that are researchers at Harvard and MIT, and they do political science and things like that. But they learned basic code so they could apply, they could run simple programs to help their research. But also basic coding, I would say, informs how you could use blockchain for whatever purpose you think you could do in your research and just in the food industry generally. And there's edX classes. I really recommend the Hyperledger one on edX, and the examples it even has, as I said earlier, are directly related to food safety, and it's actually, I think, tuna catching, but tuna is for eating, so it's food. Yeah.
Great.
But again, I think it's the next wave, so I would definitely keep it in mind with whatever your project is.
And I would imagine that if we're not thinking about it as consumers and as, people that are the source of this information, we have to take in consideration that other people out there, entire industries, are thinking about that. And for us to be unaware of how that impacts us might turn out to be foolish down the road.
That's true. Yeah, and I can't think of an industry that I haven't heard of that's got someone in it doing a blockchain thing with it. This morning I was talking with an energy company and a municipal bonds company that wanted to use blockchain computing to do what they do. Right, so it's totally different, but it's going to affect a lot of our lives. So just you don't have to dive deep into it, but pay attention.
Very good. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Your practice is in Massachusetts. You're also in Utah and New York, I see. Maybe not so much Utah, but definitely different markets that I definitely can recognize in terms of intellectual property and centers of industry that are going to be depending on how we use and regulate aspects of blockchain in the future. So thank you very much. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end our recording.
All right.
Let me figure out how.